36 years old, zero acting experience, and carrying his own paintings under his arm just in case the audition went nowhere. That's how Will Sampson walked into a Hollywood casting office. He walked out with a role in a film that swept every major Academy Award. That same man once halted an entire movie production because the studio had cast white actors as Native Americans. He refused to speak a single line of dialogue until the studio fixed it. They fixed it. And the phone call that started everything? It came from a used car dealer who called up a producer and told him he'd just met the biggest son of a bitch Indian who ever walked through his door. That's the kind of entrance Will Sampson made, and he hadn't even tried yet. Sampson was a 6'7" Muscogee Creek rodeo cowboy, Navy veteran, oil field roughneck, and self-taught painter out of Muscogee, Oklahoma. He became the first Native American to rise as a genuine Hollywood star. He reshaped the way an entire industry pictured his people, and he insisted the whole time that acting was just a way to fund his real passion, which was painting. Before he was Chief Bromden, before he went head-to-head with Jack Nicholson and Clint Eastwood, before he performed a real exorcism on a cursed film set, Will Sampson was a barefoot kid in rural Oklahoma drawing pictures in the dirt. William Sampson Jr. was born on the 27th of September, 1933, in Muscogee, Oklahoma, to Wiley and Mabel Lewis Sampson, both full-blood Muscogee Creek Indians. The family called him Sonny. At birth, he was given the Muscogee name KVS Kevage, meaning left-handed, and that left hand would end up shaping everything. From the moment he could hold a pencil, Will drew. He drew on every surface he could get to. When paper ran out, he drew on his sister's school book covers. When those ran out too, he went outside and drew in the dirt with a stick. His sister Norma would later say, from the time he could hold a pencil in his hand, that boy drew. When he didn't have no paper and pencil, he'd draw on the ground. Norma used to crumple up his drawings and toss them in the trash without a second thought. Years later, she'd say with a laugh that carried a quiet sting, I never dreamed that later on I wouldn't even be able to afford one of his paintings. Will likely left school somewhere around the 9th grade, but a classroom was never going to be where his real education happened. That would come from the back of a Bronco, the deck of a Navy ship, and a canvas nobody had asked him to paint. So what do you do when you're a teenage Creek kid in 1940s Oklahoma with more talent than opportunity and a body that just keeps growing taller? Number 2, 20 years of dust and canvas. You climb on a horse and hold on for dear life. Will Sampson stepped into his first rodeo at 14 years old. For the next 2 decades, he rode the circuit, specializing in saddle bronc and bull riding. He competed across Oklahoma and the wider West, chasing prize money that arrived in bursts and slipped away just as quickly. Between rodeos, he served in the United States Navy from 1953 to 1955. Somewhere during that stretch, he picked up the ability to fly a plane, though his sister was quick to clarify the record. He was in the Navy, and somewhere along the line he learned how to pilot a plane, but he was not a Navy pilot, Norma insisted. That distinction mattered to her. The truth always mattered to the Sampsons. After his service, Will drifted between jobs the way a tumbleweed drifts between fence posts. Oil field, roughneck, construction worker, lineman, whatever kept the lights on. Through all of it, through every 8-second ride and every long shift, he never stopped painting. He painted Western landscapes and traditional Muscogee scenes. He painted horses and buffalo and faces that looked like his own. His style drew comparisons to Charles M. Russell, the celebrated painter of the American West, but filtered through the eyes of a 20th century Creek man who had actually lived the life Russell only romanticized. That's a crucial difference. Some paintings sold. When they did, his sister recalled, he'd have a high old time. Then the money would vanish, and he'd be back hunting for work. You've heard of starving artists, Norma said. I guess that's what he was. He'd grown past 6 feet in his teens and just kept going, eventually standing somewhere between 6'4" and 6'7", depending on who was measuring. He had hands like shovels, a voice like distant thunder, and a face that seemed carved straight from Oklahoma sandstone. He was 41 years old. He had never acted, had no agent, no connections, and no particular interest in anything Hollywood. Then a used car dealer picked up a telephone. But how does a phone call from an auto lot in the Pacific Northwest reach the offices of a major Hollywood production? Number 3. The phone call that changed everything. In 1974, producers Saul Zaentz and Michael Douglas were preparing to bring One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to the screen, Ken Kesey's novel about rebellion inside a mental institution. They had Jack Nicholson locked in for the lead. They had Milos Forman set to direct. But they had a problem. The most essential character in the story, the one who literally soars over the cuckoo's nest in the film's final moments, was Chief Bromden, a towering Native American man who spends years inside the asylum pretending he can't hear or speak. The production needed a real Native American actor, and he had to be physically massive. Hollywood's old habit of casting a white actor in brownface simply wasn't an option here. The character's size wasn't just a detail, it was the whole idea. Michael Douglas happened to sit next to a man named Mel Lambert on a flight. Lambert was a used car dealer and rodeo announcer out of Yakima, Washington, whose father had built a business selling cars to many Native customers in that region. Douglas mentioned the search for the right actor. Lambert tucked it away in his memory. Half a year went by before Lambert picked up the phone and dialed Douglas. "The biggest son of a bitch Indian came in the other day," Lambert reportedly told him. That man was Will Sampson. A competing version of the story, told by Will's own sister, plays out a little differently. She says Will was up in the mountains near Yakima, working on a painting, when a friend back in town passed along word that a movie was hunting for a tall, ugly Indian. Will's reaction was simple. Why not? He was never the type to walk away from a long shot. However, the two sides actually met. What happened next took on the weight of Hollywood legend. Will walked into the casting office with his own paintings tucked under his arm. His thinking was completely his own, completely Will Sampson. If they passed on him as an actor, maybe they'd take a painting instead. They hired him as an actor. Then they bought the paintings anyway. The first time Will stepped onto the small production plane, Jack Nicholson reportedly climbed right into his lap and kept saying, "It's the chief, man. It's the chief." Will Sampson had never acted a day in his life, not in a school production, not in a local show, not even in front of a mirror. He was about to share the screen with the biggest movie star alive, in a film no one yet realized would land among the greatest ever made. But could a 41-year-old rodeo painter with zero training actually hold his own against Jack Nicholson? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest hit theaters in 1975 and tore through the industry like nothing before it. The film swept all 5 of the major Academy Awards, taking Best Picture, Best Director for Milos Forman, Best Actor for Nicholson, Best Actress for Louise Fletcher, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Only 2 other films in history had ever pulled off that clean a sweep. It brought in over $108 million domestically on a budget of just $3 million, making it the second highest grossing film of 1,975, trailing only Jaws. And standing at the center of all of it was Will Sampson, quiet for most of the runtime, enormous and watchful, his face saying everything his character's mouth refused to. Chief Bromden barely says a word through most of the film. Will Sampson played him as a man hiding inside himself, pretending to be deaf and mute, while Nurse Ratched ran her ward like a slow-motion prison, and every other patient either fought back or fell apart. When Bromden finally broke his silence, the whole film leaned in. The word he said was juicy fruit. McMurphy slides him a stick of gum, and this giant of a man who hasn't spoken in years quietly says the brand name back to him. That's it. And somehow, audiences never forgot it. The Nation put it plainly, writing that if anyone could steal a scene from Jack Nicholson, Sampson was the man to do it. Journalist Dick Kleiner profiled him in 1976 and described his acting as instinctive, which feels exactly right. Milos Forman had rolled the dice on someone with no film experience, and what he got back was one of the most memorable supporting performances of the entire decade. Sampson had insisted on one thing going in. Chief Bromden was not going to be another Hollywood caricature. No broken English, no grunting for the camera. In a 1976 New York Times interview, he said he refused to let the character become part of Hollywood's long habit of turning Native Americans into what he called livestock. Hollywood writers and directors are still using them for livestock, he said. Quiet, sharp, and completely unanswerable. So what do you do when the biggest new face in Hollywood never wanted to be there in the first place? Will Sampson answered that by working on his own terms. In 1976, Robert Altman brought him into Buffalo Bill and the Indians alongside Paul Newman and Burt Lancaster, a revisionist Western that challenged nearly everything the genre had ever claimed about the American frontier. Eastwood, a director famous for cutting anything that dragged, left the whole scene exactly as it was. He knew what he was looking at. No effects, no music, just two men at a fire deciding not to destroy each other. It's still considered one of the finest exchanges ever put on screen in the Western genre. The White Buffalo came out in 1977, with Charles Bronson leading the cast and Will Sampson playing Crazy Horse. That production turned out to be the moment Will stopped being just another working actor and became something the studio system wasn't prepared to deal with. So, what exactly did he find when he got there? This is number 6, the day he shut down a movie. Will walked onto that set, looked at the cast list, and took stock of what he was seeing. The film was set on the American frontier. It featured multiple Native American characters, and nearly every single one of those characters was being played by a white actor. He refused to work, not a single line spoken, not a single step in front of a camera. Production stopped cold. A full Hollywood feature ground to a halt because one man said enough. His demand wasn't complicated. Hire Native actors to play Native roles. Stop putting brown paint on white faces and calling it representation. The studio pushed back. Will didn't budge. In the end, the production made adjustments and brought in Native performers for the parts that were left. This wasn't the first time someone had pushed back against Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans. Marlon Brando had sent Sakine Littlefeather to decline his Oscar on his behalf back in 1973. But Brando was a white superstar, making a point from a position of total power. Will Sampson was a Native actor, putting his own career on the line, on a set where his only leverage was his refusal to move and the strength of what he believed. That experience shifted something in him. He understood that fighting one set at a time, one production at a time, would never be enough. Native actors needed more than protests. They needed real infrastructure. A system built from the ground up by someone willing to build it. Which brings us to number 7, building the door he was never given. In 1983, Will Sampson and his assistant Zoe Escobar secured a $30,000 grant from the Administration for Native Americans and used it to found the American Indian Registry for the Performing Arts. The idea was straightforward, but nothing like it had ever existed. They created a directory, a central clearinghouse listing every Native American actor, actress, dancer, musician, stunt performer, and crew member available for work in film and television. Studios would no longer be able to claim they couldn't find qualified Native talent. The registry would hand them exactly that, an entire book full of people ready to work. The registry's executive director, Bob Hicks, would later share a story that showed just how far Will's vision had reached, even after he was gone. In the late 1980s, a production company came knocking, looking for Native performers for an upcoming Western. Hicks passed them a registry book. They passed him a script. The company was TIG Productions. The man behind it was Kevin Costner, and the film was called Dances with Wolves. That production cast Native actors in every Native role, won 7 Academy Awards including Best Picture, and became the most celebrated portrayal of Native Americans in Hollywood history. all running through a casting pipeline that a rodeo painter from Muscogee, Oklahoma, had built on a $30,000 grant and a flat refusal to let the old ways stand. Through all of it, Will's acting career never stopped moving. His 1979 film Fishhawk earned him a Canadian Genie Award nomination for Best Foreign Actor, proof that he could carry a picture on his own. He worked across television series, TV movies, and independent films on 3 continents, consistently choosing roles where native characters got to be full human beings rather than background decoration. But his final major film role, in 1986, would deliver the strangest chapter of an already remarkable life. What actually happens when a real medicine man walks onto a movie set that half of Hollywood believes is cursed? That's exactly what went down on Poltergeist 2, The Other Side. Released in 1986, the film starred Will Sampson as Taylor, a Native American shaman who helps an ordinary family fight back against a supernatural threat. The production grossed nearly $75 million worldwide against a $19 million budget, a clear financial win. But the film carried a long shadow. Several cast members from the original Poltergeist had died in the years between the 2 productions, and the so-called Poltergeist curse was already deeply embedded in Hollywood lore by the time cameras started rolling on the sequel. The set had an uneasy reputation before a single scene was shot. Will Sampson wasn't just portraying a medicine man for the cameras. He was one in real life. And by multiple accounts from people who were there, he picked up on something genuinely wrong with that soundstage. One night, Will reportedly performed a traditional cleansing ceremony on the set, a full exorcism of the space. Co-star Craig Nelson later said that after Will's ceremony, the strange occurrences and the persistent sense of dread that had been following the production simply stopped. Years later, Nelson made the trip to Will's grave in Oklahoma. He arrived during cicada season, the air absolutely loud with the sound of them. Nelson stood at the headstone and said, "Hey Will, it's Craig." He said the noise started pulling back the moment he spoke. Within seconds, it was completely silent. Nelson stood in that quiet, said what he'd come to say, and walked away. That story can't be verified, but it catches something true about who Will Sampson was. He lived in the space between the rational and the spiritual, between Hollywood's constructed drama and something far older than either of them. People who knew Will Sampson well believed he carried something they simply couldn't put into words. That same year, he appeared alongside Chuck Norris and Louis Gossett Jr. in Firewalker, which turned out to be his last feature film, because by 1987, the body that had seen him through rodeos, oil fields, Navy service, and decades on Hollywood sets was giving out. But across all those films and all that fame, what did Will Sampson consider his true life's work? Number 9. First, last, and always a painter. Remember the boy who drew in the dirt when he had no paper to draw on? Remember the 41-year-old man who brought his paintings to a casting call because he figured they might buy one even if they passed on him as an actor? That boy and that man were the same person. He never wavered. "I'm first, last, and always a painter," Will Sampson said. His sister confirmed it without a moment's hesitation. Before he was anything else, he was an artist. It was his first and deepest love. Where Hollywood saw a movie star, Will saw a painter who happened to act in between canvases. His work captured Western landscapes, Muscogee ceremonial scenes, wild horses, buffalo hunts, and the faces of a people whose stories were rarely told by one of their own. His large canvas, titled Ribbon Dance, portraying a traditional Muscogee ceremony, still hangs at the Creek Council House Museum in Muscogee to this day. His paintings were shown at some of the most respected institutions in the country, including the Gilcrease Museum and the Philbrook Museum of Art. A book published after his death, Beyond Cuckoo's Nest, The Art and Life of William Sampson Jr., brought together more than 50 of his paintings and over 70 sketches. That collection revealed an artistic output that would have been impressive for someone painting full-time. let alone a man who was also riding rodeos, working oil fields, and shooting Hollywood films at the same time. He once said that acting merely supported his painting habit. It was a joke, but like most of Will Sampson's jokes, it carried the truth right alongside the laugh. The film money bought him time to paint. The paintings were what he left behind. Long after the last frame of his final film fades from anyone's memory, those canvases remain, proof that Will Sampson knew exactly who he was from the very first moment he pressed a stick into Oklahoma dirt. But what happens when a body tested by decades of rodeos, oil fields, and Hollywood finally hits its breaking point? Number 10. The giant who refused to disappear. In early 1987, Will Sampson was diagnosed with scleroderma, a chronic autoimmune disease that hardens and thickens the skin and can turn against the body's internal organs. In Will's case, it went straight for his heart and his lungs. The disease showed no mercy. The man who had once weighed 260 pounds, who had been described as one of the most physically commanding figures in Hollywood, wasted away to 140 pounds. Scleroderma consumed him from the inside out, slowly taking the body that had carried him through everything he had ever survived. On the 23rd of April, 1987, Will went under the knife at Houston Methodist Hospital for a heart-lung transplant. The new organs took hold, but his body had been worn down by months of starvation and illness, and it simply couldn't keep up. His immune system had been deliberately suppressed to stop rejection, and that opened the door for valley fever, a dormant fungal infection he'd likely picked up years before in California's dry air, to come roaring back. 41 days later, on the 3rd of June 1987, Will Sampson died of post-operative kidney failure. He was 53 years old. His body was brought home to Muscogee for a private Muscogee ceremony, complete with an all-night wake. The following day, he was laid to rest at Graves Creek Cemetery in Hitchita, Oklahoma, inside the boundaries of the Muscogee Creek Nation, the same land where he was born, where he once drew pictures in the dirt, and where he first climbed onto a horse. Jack Nicholson mourned him through his agent, saying simply, "I will miss a great friend." But Will's story didn't stop at that cemetery. His son Tim stepped into the role of Chief Bromden in a 2001 Broadway production of Cuckoo's Nest, alongside Gary Sinise, carrying his father's presence straight onto the stage. His sons, Sam and Miko, formed the Sampson Brothers, traveling the country performing traditional Muscogee hoop dances and fancy dances, keeping their father's culture breathing through movement and music. On what would have been Will's 85th birthday, they released a tribute called "I Know This Man," with lyrics that read, "It is through my blood he again walks this earth." Will Sampson Road runs through Muscogee County today, named for a man who never truly left, no matter how far Hollywood took him. Then on the 14th of October, 2023, 36 years after his death, he was inducted into the National Native American Hall of Fame at the First Americans Museum in Oklahoma City. Think about everything he was: the barefoot kid sketching in the dirt, the rodeo rider painting between competitions, the struggling artist whose own sister tossed his drawings in the trash, the man who carried his paintings into an audition, who shut down a movie set, who helped build the organization that cast Dances with Wolves, who performed an exorcism on a Hollywood soundstage, and who told the world, plainly and without apology, that he was first, last, and always a painter. He was every one of those things, but above all of them, Will Sampson became something Hollywood had never let a Native American be before him. He was the star. If his story stayed with you, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because the next person we cover might be someone you grew up watching without ever knowing the real story. See you in the next one.